Moving right along, it is my pleasure to present to introduce our first speaker, who will be talking about hold up mock kickoff. And please join me in welcoming Travis. I don't know how to pronounce the last name still, and Michael Corsetto. Correct.
Hello.
Hello, I assume we're not live.
It says we're being streamed to YouTube. I got the presentation up.
Yeah, I already introduced you to, if you missed it.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is going to be a great experience, trying something new here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a virtual FRC mock kickoff. Myself, I'm Travis Schuh. I'm a mentor for Team 971. And with me, we have Michael Corsetto, who's a mentor for Team 1678. And then also on the line for the hands-on breakout sessions for the kickoff, we have some team members from FRC Team 2135 Presentation Invasion to help us go through that, with the audience here. So moving on to the next slide. So this is going to be, a little bit different than what we would do if we were in person here. What we're going to do is we're going to start out with a 30-minute presentation about how to schedule for a successful season and go over some of the best practices and lessons learned there. And then after that, we're going to follow on with a 90-minute mock kickoff in a virtual setting. So if we're in person, we would take the audience and we'd split into a bunch of different breakout sessions. And then in those breakout sessions, we would go through a series of discussion prompts that we'll go through and cover here. But since we're virtual, we're going to have to do that a little bit differently. So that's why we've invited 2135 to be on the call with us and help with bringing that experience to you guys. And have a example breakout session with us online. But we really do encourage you guys to all follow along with these exercises on your own. And so really, ideally, if you can, reach out to your friends, get them to show up and join on the call right now, so that for the first bit, and then join in with you during that 90-minute virtual session. And we've set it up so that hopefully you guys can take what we're doing and mirror that along on your own. So hoping this all works out and looking forward to giving it a go.
Oh yeah.
So want to start off with, very high level, what is the, high level overview of what the FRC design process usually looks like. So this mirrors a lot of what, mirrors what you see in, a lot of engineering design processes, because the FRC is really, really is a mirror of what happens in the real world with engineering projects. So, in the FRC world, you start out with the understanding what the problem is. And this comes, coming from kickoff is when you get the game, and, at the beginning of, the design process starts with understanding, that manual and really breaking down what's there. After that, we typically conceptualize, that problem, conceptualize solutions to the different parts of the problems, and come up with, what general solutions you're working towards. And then from there, you end up and you kind of kick off into the meat of the process. And that's this design, build, and test cycle. So really take those solutions, you build designs that address those, that implement those solutions, or you design designs that implement those solutions, you then build them, and then you test them. And after you test them, you've learned something that you probably didn't expect. And so you go from that, and then you loop back through to going back into the design phase to address the issues that might have surfaced, and you continue going through that. And really, the heart of the season is spent in that process, where you're sort of building out your robot. And then at the end, the competition is a time deadline that we all work under. So at some point you get kicked out of this and you have to bring your robot to competition. So Mike's going to go through a little bit more in more detail, our recommendations to what the start of a successful season looks like, and talk through some of the basics there.
Awesome. When Travis and I initially gave this presentation in December, we were trying to come up with what we actually call this. So we just kind of named it the 1678 season start method. There's really no ownership over this process, but it's just what we've used to reference this formula that we're going to go through here. And this is going to, these are the kind of the basic formula that we think, not just like, FRC teams that are maybe, very experienced can use, but every FRC team can use these principles in order to structure the beginning of their season. And like we said, we're going through this exercise over the next 2 hours. And so we want to give you the tools to effectively launch your season after kickoff. So on 1678 and the method that we recommend, it has 4 main starting components. Now, obviously, these 4 components aren't going to get you to a finished robot. There's a ton more work involved, and Travis mentioned a bunch of the higher level steps that go into every team's development of their robot. But these are the 4 things that we think that teams are going to want to start their season with and launch their season off these 4 bases. So the first one is reading the rules. And we believe that it's important for every team member to have a strong understanding of the rules. The way I like to describe it is, you would never try to play soccer if you never understood the rules to soccer, because you'd go out onto the field and, you'd see everyone else kicking the ball around and you'd wonder why they don't just pick up the ball and carry it into the goal. But if you knew the rules of soccer, you know that's not allowed. So to be an effective player at this game and be effectively contributing, you need to understand the rules of the game. And so a great part about this is there's a lot of teams that offer resources around the rules, and 1678 is a particular team where we will publish the rules test a couple hours after kickoff, and we get the game manual. So we have a group of students that focus their first couple hours of the season on developing that rules test. Obviously, we don't get the game early. We're just like the rest of you. We're totally in the dark. But we publish that rules test not just for our own team to take, but we invite any other team to take the rules test, make a copy of it, and distribute it to your own team so that your whole team can test their knowledge of the game rules. So that's what we think the first step is. And then step 2 in this kickoff season start process is answering what we call the what questions. And we're going to go through what that looks like. But really, in the what questions, you're trying to answer what is our team strategy, what is the robot going to do, and you're trying to develop at the end of this step 2, you're trying to develop essentially what we call a technical criteria list, right? You're trying to establish what your robot's going to do in the game. And now the game's going to come out and there's going to be a whole host of things to do. In 2020, for example, if you're familiar with the game we just had, there were multiple ways to score points. There was balancing involved. There were balls that you could shoot. You could shoot them into a high goal, into an inner goal, into a low goal. So lots of different scoring options. There was that spinny wheel control panel thing. And so as a team, you need to figure out what your technical scope is going to be for your project. And you need to list out those criteria, because knowing what you're going to do is then going to inform how you approach designing the robot. So this step 2 is really important. And we'll emphasize a little bit more about the keys with that step in the next part of the presentation. Answering the how questions comes next. So, this step is taking that list of criteria that you've developed. So you've worked as a team, created a list, and you're going to take that list and you're going to then design a robot to that list. And the how process looks like putting out ideas and thoughts on, hey, what if, we decided in the last step that we want to be able to pick up balls off the ground. That's like one of our design criteria that we have for a robot this season. So in the how section, maybe someone has an idea for how the balls could be effectively picked up off the ground. And they would share that with the team during this step 3, which is the how process, okay? So how is the robot going to carry out these technical criteria? At the end of step 3, hopefully you've identified a lot of good ideas, right? Hopefully everybody on your team is able to contribute to this step as well. And maybe you get some unique ideas coming out of that you can then move into the rest of your season and say, hey, you know, these 5 or 6 ideas really stood out to the group. And we think that these are either worth designing or worth prototyping or moving ahead one way or another. And then the last step, this is a little bit more basic, but it's just as critical as the other 3 steps, is committing to building your drive base, okay? And I mean, I think Travis will echo this. You know, the kitbot is one of the biggest assets that the FRC has. And as a team, if you can commit to building the kitbot, you are opening up so much potential for your team to build a great robot, because you've eliminated some design risk and some scope risk, and you're able to focus your team's efforts and energies into other areas of the robot, like mechanisms and testing and drive practice and programming. And you get that back by building the kitbot. So we highly recommend the kitbot, but regardless of what drive base your team is going to build, it's important to commit to that drive base early, because by limiting the time you spend on the drive base, you're enabling your team to spend more time on other areas that are going to be important later in the season. And lastly, with all this, that was a lot of information in a couple of minutes, but teams are encouraged to commit to this process before the season starts. So meet with your team, especially your team's leadership, and say, hey, you know what? We've been a little bit loose in our season's plan the last couple of years. It'd be really nice to get a little bit more focused. Can we commit to something like the 1678 season start method and move from there? So something to consider for your team. Okay, a brief note, if you didn't know, 2020 was unique in the fact that it was the first year we didn't have to ship or bag our robot in the modern era of FRC. You know, one thing that we noted back in December was don't plan on doing more because of no bag. We're going to talk a little bit about where we fell short on that advice on our own teams. Travis, I'm sure we'll have more to share on that as well. But really, our advice back then, and it still holds now, and we're going to be telling ourselves that going into 2021 and beyond, is just because there's more time available with the robot out of a bag doesn't mean that you can design your robot to actually do more and have more scope in your project. It's important to take that extra time to leverage that for testing and driver practice. Those are all things that I wish I was telling myself 4 months ago when we were dragging our feet to actually get a robot done. So, Travis, am I still going? Are we good here?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yep. No.
All right.
You want to go through?
Awesome. Yeah, let's go through some scenarios. So we had talked about the bag kind of changed things up a little bit, but you're going to see how this is a recommended, a team that usually builds one robot. What does their season look like? What do we recommend a season like this look like? So, you know, in this scenario 1 here, before a team would do the 1678 start method for the first couple weeks, they begin building the bare bones of a robot, building their scoring mechanisms on top of that kit chassis that they built. And then weeks 5 and 6 are spent like actually turning the robot on, putting the code onto it, testing the code, doing a little bit of driver practice. But then unfortunately, you know, after week 6 in the old era, you had to put the robot in the bag, and you'll see that pretty much all the time spent between competitions, you have a robot that's in the bag. So what does it look like when there's no bag, and what's our advice in that scenario, which is the kind of the world of FRC we're living in now? The beginning of the season looks exactly the same. So we recommend that teams are not increasing the scope of what they build. They're building a similar complexity of robot that they normally would. But look at what happens in weeks 7 and 8 and the time leading up to competition. You need to think about that time a little bit differently now. So it obviously gives you more time to do driver practice and autonomous modes, things that maybe your team hasn't gotten a chance to spend a lot of time doing in the past. I know, when I was in high school, I remember very regularly having, 1 day, 2 days to test code before the competition or before the robot had to go into a crate. And I think that's a common experience among FRC teams. But holding to a strict 6-week kind of build till you bring up and test, and then leaving those following weeks for auto modes and driver practice can really open up your team to identifying potential issues with your robot, getting your drivers more practice so that you're more effective in the competition. And then the last thing that we determined, and we lived this out this year, was you need to have a design freeze where you say enough is enough. We're done making improvements to the robot. We need to commit to what we have and take that to competition and make sure that whatever we have is as ready to go. Because if you're left tweaking things all the way to the last minute, there's a good chance that you end up leaving problems that should have been solved, not solved, or introducing new problems that you didn't get a chance to fully flesh out. So you have to determine when your drop dead date is saying, hey, we're not going to make changes past this point so that we can give ourselves enough practice and get ready for the competition.
And just to add on to that, that when we talk about having the design freeze, really, the whole week before, at the beginning of the week before, is when you should set that design freeze. And then it's about practicing in, changing from just practicing to being practicing in a targeted competition mode. So that means running timed matches, getting a feel for how long you're gonna have during a match to do whatever your strategy plan is, and just practice running that strategy over and over. And you're gonna, you do that, you'll come into the competitions much better prepared. And then another thing to sort of add to this is that you look at this week 7 and 8 and the week before competition, and you compare it to, having a robot sitting in your bag versus working with it. Really, we think that this is a huge opportunity for teams that previously had a robot in the bag, because this is getting into the heart of that design, build, and test cycle. This is where you're going to be sort of doing those testing and the tweaks, and have an opportunity for that learning that comes, but for going through and sort of identifying what the problems are, doing the tweaks that fix those problems, and getting to go and implement those.
Totally.
And then I guess we didn't quite touch on it here, but if you look at what happens after your first competition, well, between the competition, really the focus isn't on, you're going to see a lot of great robots out there at the competition. The focus between the competition shouldn't be on going out and adding all the features that you wish you had designed the first time. It's really about focusing on the features that you have, focusing on the mechanisms you have, and getting them to work better, making incremental improvements, fixing the things that broke during the competition so they won't break the next time, and really sort of focus on the incremental side. And really, I think a lot of with the robots that 971 and 1678 build, there's a lot of value for us to be focusing on making what we have work as well as it can, rather than wishing we had something else and trying to go and build that. Whenever you see teams do large late season rebuilds, it's very unusual for them to come out with a robot that is working as well as their previous one. And then we kind of listed it, after, some teams will do multiple competitions and maybe get a chance to, some teams will get a chance to go to the championships, but every team should hopefully have a chance to go to an off season. And, if you're going to be changing a mechanism, really the place to be looking at doing that is after you've already gotten your baseline working. So once everything's working and maybe your second competition, you're in a groove there, maybe you have time there to, as a team, look around and say, hey, what's maybe one small change we could do to kind of improve a mechanism rather than just fixing it, and then definitely be cautious about that, so you don't want to screw up the good thing that works, but there's definitely an opportunity there to do an iteration there. Really, the emphasis is also should be on the practice. And one thing also to highlight on this is that if the season doesn't end when the competitions the season ends. Really, the off-season events are a great way for a team to grow and develop. And so you'll see a lot of teams, a lot of the teams that are growing and becoming more successful every year. They're spending time in the off-season doing that iteration and development and sort of really honing the team's skills. And so we recommend that everyone thinks about there being an iteration cycle after their last in-season competition before the off season, where they're trying to doing more practice and adjusting things.
All right, thanks, Travis. So a couple of other schedules to highlight. I just wanted to give people an insight on what 1678 season looks like, and you'll notice that things really didn't change. And if I'm honest, I don't think because we generated this presentation back in December, I don't think I thought through enough of what no build was going to look, or no bag was going to look like, because you'll notice that our schedule doesn't really change because of the fact that we build multiple robots, and so we used to have other robots to play with while our competition robot was in the bag. And so you would think, that just transfers over one-to-one. Well, it doesn't really, because in the past, you tried to get as much of the competition robot as you could done by bag, and then you planned out retrofits in order to get ready for a competition. The formula looks a lot, or I guess the dynamics feel a lot different when there's no bag at all, because you can really hold on to your competition robot all the way up until that first event. And so it introduces a lot more temptation to let your schedule drag. And in 1678's case, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we made some critical mistakes, I think, that resulted in us not being ready for our first event. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but you know, I think looking at this, we'll probably have a little bit more edits to make to the schedule before we go into 2021.
Great. And this is, you know, showing likewise with Mike. I don't think we also didn't anticipate that tendency to push things out. But this is kind of going through a snapshot of what 971's schedule looked like before and after. So I want to start out by highlighting, you know, we do not recommend that other teams follow this, and want to go into maybe a little bit on why. And the main reason here is that we have probably one of the longest upfront development periods in FRC. Mike continues to give us grief about this. And really, you know, this is kind of needed to build and design the types of robots we do with the amount of complexity that we have. And so the risk with this is that there's very little robot time for robot bring up, and you're really counting on that first, you know, being able to go from the first bring up to competition ready in a short amount of time. And that's something that we've built a core competency around on 971, and it's something that, you know, others can do, but you have to be very sure about, you know, being able to pull that off. And some of the things that go into, you know, us being able to do that is that we have, you know, developed an ability to develop and test software without having a physical robot, and which is very important to a quick bring up time. And also we pay a lot of fine attention to details during the design process and catch many of the mistakes in the, you know, or many of the potential problems with the parts before they even get cut. And that also takes, you know, a lot of experience and really taking a meticulous approach. So that's the caveat. So we'll go through a little bit what's here, and you'll notice that really, you know, there's a lot more time spent in the beginning around, you know, around CAD and manufacture. Takes more time to CAD complicated robots, and it takes more time to manufacture them. And then we're assembling and bringing them up in a relatively short amount of time. And leaving ourselves just a little bit of time before competition to get the first competition to get some practice and do an auto mode, and then, you know, compete at that first event. So if we look at with the no bag, I'd say that, you know, we'll talk about this on the next slide some more, but really that first bit where we had the CAD and manufacture, that's, you know, we didn't hold ourselves to be as rigid with the schedule as we should have, and that pushed out way longer than it should have, and we really got pinched on the time to bring something up before the competition. Then after the competition, you know, I think we're in a pretty standard phase where we're adjusting things in practice, tweaking things, doing practices, and developing auto modes.
All right, no bag lessons learned. A couple of things I wanted to highlight. I mean, first off, I kind of alluded to this already, but one thing for our 1678's experience in particular in 2020, you know, we aim to build 3 robots. And so as a part of that, you know, we started by cutting 3 chassis right away. You know, I mentioned early on that we commit to a drivetrain very early and just build that right away. What happened was, you know, we were building these robots, and the core part of the robot was the indexer. And so the indexer was going through a lot of iterations, and then our shooters were going through a lot of iterations. And what ended up happening was we had, we called it alpha. We had alpha built. And while alpha was being built, beta was being designed, and then beta got built. And while beta was being built, we were learning about beta and throwing that into comp. But normally we would get the core of all 3 robots done a lot earlier and then start making incremental improvements. But we waited to get that core architecture built up for competition robot until way later on in the season. And so, you know, we were doing our first climbs with our competition robot like 3 or 4 days before our competition, right? And that's just because so many other things got pushed back, and we kept tweaking with the robot between each iteration on each other, like alpha to beta to competition. And so we had 3 different robots, but by the time we got to LA North, we had 3 robots with like entirely different versions of the indexer on each one of the 3 of them. They were not cross-compatible at all. And competition robot like barely got across the finish line with a lot of rushed work at the end. So it was a different feeling than what we've had in the past, I think, going into our first competition, where normally we have a competition robot that's built and put in the bag and it's run and, you know, it's been tested in the bag and or before the bag, and then it gets brought out of the bag at the competition and gets retrofits on it. We weren't running that competition robot until a couple of days before our first event. So we because of our desire to pack more and more iterations in, we ended up not building the competition robot until way later, and it put us in a big pinch.
So on 971 last season, we had the same weakness of wanting to pack in more iterations, but it looked a little different for what we were doing. And so really, you know, with 971, our temptation was to expand out that early development activity so that we could really, you know, so we could have a much more informed CAD and have, you know, higher confidence in what we were doing and actually really have greater capabilities than we necessarily would have had. And so doing that really, you know, we focused a lot of energy into prototyping early on, both in terms of, you know, people, resources, and also timeline. And that really, you know, pushed back when we had the final CAD done and when we could manufacture it and when we could get it all assembled. And then after we had that, we were, you know, because we had the competition robot there and we knew that, you know, there wasn't this constraint of, you know, you're limited to what you could do in sort of a Thursday bring up. We let, you know, perfection become the enemy of good enough. And we're still trying to tweak mechanisms before we had things, you know, even fully brought up. So really, you know, the net result of that is that, you know, we were supposed to compete week 4. We got told the beginning of week 3 that there was no week 4 happening. And so at that time, you know, we were at our final push weekend and we actually hadn't even finished building the robot yet. And that's the reason why no one's seen any video of it working, because we haven't seen that video either. I will say though that I'd say that, you know, one thing that I think that was nice is that we actually ended up building 2 of the core robots, you know, the same cores that like we used to do when we're practicing comp. But because we weren't, you know, because one of them wasn't in a bag, we were able to look at them a little bit differently. And sort of towards the end, we focused in on getting one of them brought up with the minimum capabilities while we were sort of leapfrogging the capabilities on the second robot. So it lagged a little bit behind in sort of, you know, wiring and mechanical assembly and everything. But because we'd already tested and we're bringing up software in the first one, we sort of knew what we wanted to fix. And so we were able to sort of design and build and then implement those different mechanisms on that second robot. And so I see that, you know, going forward post no bag, we're probably going to be more deliberate about how we take advantage of this sort of leapfrog effect. And that will like let us, you know, get that, you know, those 2 core baseline of robots working, you know, earlier. And then we can then always have one state of good, and then we'll sort of like, you know, retrofit, leapfrog the 2 robots up in capability. So this was the, oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was gonna say, this was the presentation that we had in the beginning. Want to go to Vlad and ask if we have any questions on YouTube that we want to take in this time before we move on and go through the virtual workshop. So Vlad, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. The first question is, when testing software, do you just use regular unit tests or to test logic, or do you use this, or do you also simulate your subsystems with your models?
I guess that one's probably pointed towards 971. I'm a mechanical mentor, but I will do my best to capture what we do. I think that there's a mix of unit tests and there's also some simulation. So all of the controls bring ups are done with simulation, and then the unit tests. And I know there are unit tests for different components. I also know that the infrastructure that we've built is you know, that the team has been building over the years is designed for being able to basically swap between having virtual inputs, you know, pre-recorded virtual inputs, and between real inputs. So it's designed to be flexible and modular so that we can sort of test it, you know, without having a physical robot. But yeah, you'll have to listen to talks from my brother if you want to get more details on that.
And I have no idea what we do.
All right. The second question is, what do you think you'll do differently next year, given your robots are finished or nearly? What do you think you'll do different next year, given your robots are finished?
So our robot's not finished. That's a pretty easy question for us. We're gonna finish out the capability we have and bring it up and get it to be rock solid robust. That's kind of the kind of, I guess, our default sort of answer there. And honestly, we don't really know what the season is going to bring, in both our ability to have access to our workspace and also what the sort of competition structure will look like. So really, we're probably trying to play it conservative, focus on getting something working, getting it early, and then and really build on having something that's reliable.
Yeah, we're focusing mostly on just getting our team structure set up, getting our trainings together. There's so many unanswered questions. I would say not even more so about the game, but about everything around the game. So like Travis was saying, what's our meeting schedule going to be like? How many people can we have at the shop? Are we going to be allowed to go to competitions? Things like that. I think it's pretty straightforward what FRC is doing with the game. They really want teams to be able to reuse their robots. And I think I would encourage most teams to focus on that. Like Travis said, get your robot rock solid. I mean, we'll be doing the same thing when we're allowed to go into our shop again, which we haven't been allowed to since, the beginning of or middle of March, right? So, for right now, we're doing a lot of training, a lot of design training, lots of software training, trying to figure out how we can get students engaged even in the COVID era.
Okay. So question number 3, what do you think build season will look like in the COVID-19 era?
No idea.
No idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was quick. We don't have a 4th question yet.
Great. Well, we're perfectly on time. Yeah. So now we're going to move into the virtual workshop. And really what we're going to do is we're going to go through and practice the 1678 season start method in 90 minutes. So it's going to be a little bit of a whirlwind. And, obviously we laid out in the timeline, like this would be happening over the first really week of the season. But we think what we can do is we can give you a flavor of what it would look like and give you a template that you can sort of build on. And really, if you're interested, we encourage you to practice this, do a mock kickoff with your team over a longer time period. And there's a lot to learn from that. So to start with, we have a bit.ly link up at the top. That link has a document behind it that is, it's read only. We encourage you to make a copy of that Google Doc and share that with, whoever you may have lined up to do a virtual kickoff with, and we'll have a copy of that document that we'll be sharing on this stream. So we've sort of broken it down into 3 sections here. I think if you go to the next one, does it say that? No, it probably doesn't.
No, I don't think so. I think it's
okay. So we've broken it into 3 sessions here. The first, and each of them are going to be split up into 30 minutes. We're going to spend, the first couple of minutes going over what's an intro to what's happening, and then we're going to spend probably the bulk of it is going to be through a workshop, we're going to go through and we're going to talk through the items. We'll be doing it with the breakout session with 2135 on here live, but we really encourage you can tune out, talk, or connect with your team and go through this in parallel. And then at the end, we're going to leave, come back, at 5, I guess with 5 minutes left, and we're going to go through a sort of summary of what it is that we went through and highlight maybe some of the key things that came up during that. And so we're going to do that 30-minute chunk in 3 sessions. Section 1 will be the rules test, and then we'll go over the what's, and then we'll do the how's. So you want to kick us off, Mike, and give us an intro on the rules test?
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone should have gotten the bit.ly. This bit.ly link will take you to this public document that you can make a copy of. I see some people are there right now. This document's going to link to a couple of things. It's going to link to the 2017 game manual, which is going to be the subject of our, 1 second here. So we're going to be going through the 2017 Steamworks game. So that's going to be the topic for our mock kickoff. We encourage people on the call to check out the game manual for themselves. For this truncated mock kickoff, we're going to be only reviewing a couple sections of the rule book. So we'll be going through sections 3, 4, and 7 in the rules test. The game animation is also very helpful. Obviously, the game animation is not a substitute for reading the manual. There's a lot of content that is not covered in the game animation, but it helps give you some context. If you weren't around in 2017, which I think most of our students that are on the call likely were not a part of FRC in 2017, this will be a good introduction to what the game looked like. And then that third link is the 2017 rules test. This is going to link to a 4-part Google form that's going to take you step by step through the rules test. And just let me give you a. Don't really want to put my email on, so we'll skip that right now. But you'll put in your contact info, and then each question will also reference what section of the rule book that question comes from. So if you're looking for some support on what's the answer to that question, you could go back into the rule book. The way that 1678 runs this section normally is we would give the rules test to the students and say, hey, don't look at the manual while you're taking the rules test. But when you submit your answers to the rules test, it'll give you feedback automatically on what questions you got right and which ones you got wrong. And so you can go back and you can reread those sections that maybe you got the question wrong in, and then take the test over again is what we would do. And it's kind of up to each team to figure out exactly how they want to run that. Before we get into the working activity section, which is essentially we have some guests from 2135 that we want to introduce. They've been let's see, let me try to pull my, we have our list here. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I'm totally off my game right now. I'm pulling up the email from your coach right now. All right, so we have a great group of students from 2135. Vlad, are we able to see everyone on the screen? I'm not really sure if that's set up yet, but okay, so we have 5 students from 2135, Presentation Invasion, out of San Jose, California. 2135 is a great local team. If you don't know them, you got to check them out. 1678 has gotten a chance to play with 2135 a lot of times over the years, and they've always been a great team to meet with at competitions. So we have 5 students from their group. We have Jadelyn, Christine, Alicia, Maya, and is it Shweta? Did I say that right?
Shweta.
Shweta, awesome. Well, it's great to have you guys here. So Travis and I wanted to do this, one, because we love 2135 and we love getting to see your guys' team every year. But we're kind of doing this live and saying, all right, we're going to try to Travis and I go through a mock kickoff with a team that we've never been to your guys' shop before. At least I haven't, right? I think I'm meeting most of you guys for the first time. So this is going to be an experiment for all of us. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, let's go through a mock kickoff together. We'll have you guys go through the same steps that we would have our students on 1678 go through, and we'll be a part of the process with you. So we'll be the mentors on our virtual team together, where 2135, 1678, and 971 join forces for an afternoon. And then for everyone else watching on the stream, during our activity sections, we'll encourage you to do the same thing that the students on 2135 are doing. So maybe you can skim the game manual and then try taking the rules test once to get familiar with it. Does that sound good to everyone on 2135? Sound good for the team? Awesome. We got to come. We're like, this is Citrus Spartan Invasion or something like that. That's going to be our alliance name for this workshop. Okay, so you guys all have the link to the rules test, right? Everyone's got that? Okay, cool. So let's have everybody go through that rules test. Travis, I'm not sure what we want to do while they're taking the rules test. What were you thinking? Do you have a better idea than what I have?
No, we're doing this as a true workshop here. So you should have time to go through and do the rules test yourself. So how about you guys go through the rules test, and if you have questions that come up, just bring them to the audience or bring them up here. And I guess Vlad, if you got any questions that come in off YouTube, please bring them up, and then we'll go and address them. So yeah, probably gonna be a little bit quiet until we'll circle back at 1:55 with the wrap ups. So
yeah, that sounds great. All right, sound good? 2135. Good. All right, good. We got thumbs up. Sweet. Let's go for it. Vlad, any questions from the group that we can answer while 2135 is going through the rules test?
Yeah, hold on. Give me a sec.
All right.
Me too. Open YouTube. There's no questions yet. Just are we just gonna be like just waiting for questions for the next 20 minutes?
Yeah, we'll give people a chance to follow along at home with the rules test, and if any questions come up, just bring them up. So I think we'll come back in 15 to 18 minutes is when we'll have the next sort of content on here.
And this will be the only time that we have a straight pause for people to do that. For the other two sessions, we'll be discussing the what's in the house, and then we'll have the whole group discussing that as a unit. So we'll go through that. That'll be more active, I guess, on the stream.
The most recent chats are on the bottom, right?
I don't know.
I mean, the chat isn't really active. There's only like 45 people watching.
No problem at all. I guess maybe while 2135 is taking it, 2135, feel free to keep going. Travis and I are just going to spitball here a little bit. I guess Travis, but I'd have a question for you actually. Is like, what do you find is like some of the trickier parts of breaking down the at least understanding the game rules each year? Like, what do you find ends up being like sticking points for you when you look at a new game?
Well, I mean, one sticking point is keeping focused on it. I think that we're pretty quick to want to jump into thinking about robots and getting things made. So I guess we see teams spend a lot of time on the rules, and we know that we should be spending more time as we do, but it's really taken us a lot of years to figure out how to sort of build out and be more deliberate about going through the rules. So we definitely learned from 1678 on that one.
Mm-hmm. Are there any aspects of the game rules that end up being more confusing that you guys need to end up like looping back around on?
Yeah, I think as we spend time trying to make sure we really understand where all the game pieces are and sort of how they move about throughout the field, because it's not always straightforward. And then making sure, I guess, we understand the penalties, sort of where the areas are that you need to keep out, because that kind of drives you need to build up your mental model of how this game plays out without actually seeing it play, right? So those are sort of key pieces to that. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I mean, one of the things that first sometimes doesn't make very clear is just how many of everything there is in a given like game. So like sometimes it takes some mathing out just to like figure out, okay, how many balls are like actually are there on the field, and where are they? Sometimes you have to do some like adding up and look at those things. It seems like every year they rewrite the way that the frame perimeter and extensions work. So it's always like a little bit of a learning process to figure out, okay, what are we doing for frame perimeter this year? What are we allowed to extend and when are we allowed to extend it? Because a lot of times your extensions and allowable limits will be like period specific as well.
Yep, I agree there.
I feel like that always, because understanding those constraints is really important, right? To like getting mechanism ideas fleshed out.
Yeah, and also the height limits too. That one's also, it's sort of, the around not just extensions, horizontally, but also vertically. It seems like there's always there are different rules about when you can be big where, and that kind of, I think back to what 2018 was, there's a lot, I felt like, there's a lot of discussion about how are you going to lift someone up and what that looked like, or same thing, I guess 2019 too, is those kind of constraints.
Yeah, in 2018, weren't you limited to extending tall in the, weren't there height limits to like only when you're in the scale area, you could be a certain height or something like that?
Yeah.
Am I misremembering? Yeah.
No, you're right. There's height limit, certain area there. And then also a certain, there was a size limit that was relaxed during that certain period.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think that one, I think another thing that people always get mixed up on is when there's any sort of safe zone in the game, and there's penalties related to that, right? It's always hard to understand exactly what the dynamics are on like, wait, when can I think in particular this past season with the safe zones in the, what is it called, the target zone and the loading zone and then the trench, but they were like two different sets of rules that govern those regions, right?
I can never keep straight of whether it's like the robot has to be fully in, or is there a penalty if the opponent robot is in and you touch them but you're not in. It seems like that changes every year, and it kind of really does have an impact on how safe those safe zones are.
Yeah, and I feel like it can confuse people, because if they don't give that a close read, sometimes when they read when they see a blue triangle or a blue area of the field that's laid out in tape, they'll assume that the red robot can't go in there at all, right? And there's a penalty for just being in there. I remember when we released our I think our 10 ball teaser video, it started by taking the 2 balls from the end of the opponent's stretch, and I think a lot of people were confused as far as if another team was even allowed to go in there, right? So I think that often can trip people up too, is like, what are the zones and what are the rules around the zones? And those can be different each year.
Yeah, those are confusing all the way through competition, but they're super critical to understand, because it's the biggest, one of the biggest things you can do to be a successful alliance partner is not get penalties, because penalties add a lot. It's an easy way to get a lot of negative, or I guess points added to the opponent's score that you could have avoided, and rarely does penalties are designed so that the positives to your alliance are going to be less than the positives to their alliance for the points.
Yep. And I know we have questions, the one, we'll get to those just a sec. One other thing I was thinking about with that was sometimes there's rules that are in like every game, and then they're not in a particular game, and they're not there for a reason. Like in 2014, I remember, we started at our first event, and that was the year with the big balls and the human players that were on the sides of the field. And we would throw the ball over the truss to our human player that was at one of the human player spots. But a lot of people didn't know that you were legally allowed to shoot the ball out of the field that year, because in a lot of games, there's penalties involved with intentionally ejecting a game element from the field, right? So, all these little details are really important, and they can drive some of the way you design your robot or build up your strategy, right? Which hopefully the two are connected.
Yeah, we definitely found that if you don't have a good solid understanding of the rules to start the conversation off, you spend too much, if you don't spend the time up front studying the rules, before getting into studying any of the game elements, you spend a lot of time during those conversations trying to figure out, is that crazy idea someone said that sounds really cool and awesome, is that actually legal or is it not? So it really is helpful to have that foundation.
Hey, Vlad, you mentioned we have some questions. You want to throw some at us?
And I can turn on my video. Thanks, host. All right, so first question is, when analyzing the game, how important are results of investment analysis in regards to scrolling tasks? And have you ever said, hold on. When analyzing the game, how important are return of investment analysis in regards to scrolling tasks? And have you ever severely over or underestimated the ease of a task? That was hard to read.
Yeah, I think that, I think we talk a lot about, we definitely follow, sort of some of the philosophy that like Karthik shares about, trying to be mindful of how you invest your resources. I don't think we don't do an explicit return on investment sort of analysis that you might do in a detailed sort of business style analysis, but definitely are paying attention to it. Trying to think about severely well, I guess this year we severely overestimated how hard buddy climbing would be, and that we actually cut that from the robot mid-season, but that was an example. And then, looking at how it played out during the competition during the 2 weeks that we had, I don't think there was a single successful buddy climb. So that I think was an example of, people overestimating return on investment there. And everyone else, people were worried about people not being able to climb in early weeks. And, I don't think that turned out to be the case.
All right. So second question is, when reading the rules first time at kickoff, how do you keep this interesting for the students, as it is a lot of sitting and reading?
That's a good question. So I'd say there's a couple of approaches you can take to something like this. I will agree that it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of sitting. And to be honest, the exact way that you get to understanding the rules is not a one size fits all formula. So I know a lot of teams have different approaches to this particular aspect. I don't think there's a reason to divert from those 4 basics, 1678 season start methods, but I think there is value in saying, hey, instead of just having every student open up their own laptop and read through a 50-page document and then take a 25 or 30 question test, maybe there's a better way for our particular team to approach that. So I know a lot of teams will open up the rule book together on a big projector, and they'll have like one team member at a time read one rule at a time, and they'll talk about it as a group. That's another very valid way to bring out the rules with the team. And then you could still do a rules test later. Maybe you do a rules test the next day and don't do it the morning of kickoff. But I think for a lot of teams, it may be too intimidating to just have everyone sit down and read the rules on their own. I know for 1678, that's a standard we set, but that's not a one size fits all sort of thing.
It's going to be a little bit based on your culture that you build and establish. And this is something that, if you're sitting here and saying, look, I would like my team to be better at reading rules, you don't have to get to 1678's style of, dedication to the rules from day one. That's something that you can build on. You can build that culture over the years. I think that one thing I'll add to that there is that, one thing we've done is that we'll have, or when we were starting out, we'd start out with having, a core, really, focused focused students and mentors who would go through and would actually read all of it, and there'd be people who would be supposed to be reading it but be distracted. So but we take that core group and we sort of leverage that to leverage a conversation from there, leverage a conversation around the rules, and really have people who have some idea of what's in the rules facilitate conversation around okay, ask some probing questions about how different areas work and turn into a scavenger hunt for the rest of the team to kind of come up with what those answers are. I think the key part is having discussion and engagement around what's going on.
All right. So another question related to the previous question: when do you have the team take the quiz? Is that after a day or more?
Sorry, can you ask that again? I missed that.
Related to the previous question, when do you have the team take the quiz? Is that after a day or more?
For 1678, it happens the morning of kickoff. So students open the rule book right after the broadcast is done, and they'll read the rules right then, and then they'll take the rules test. And ideally, most of our team has passed the rules test by lunch on kickoff. So for us, that's like maybe 2 or 3 hours after the broadcast is wrapped up, maybe 3.5, something like that.
Yeah, and I think this comes to team culture with 1678. They have I really am impressed with sort of the dedication they have here. And my understanding is you guys say you can't join in the next conversation unless you know the rules, and that's demonstrated by passing the rules test.
Yeah. Maybe we have time for one more question if we have it, Vlad.
We do not have one yet.
Oh, great. Well, let's just move on then, because I see from our results section that all of our 2135 participants have taken the rules test. So, we want to take a moment to break down the rules test. And if there's any feedback that people in the chat want to share that as well, if you had a chance to look at the rules test or have any questions about that specifically. But, I guess for starters, anyone on 2135 want to share some impressions after taking the rules test? Like, is this the first time you've taken it or something like this related to the rules? Or, how did you find the test to be related to what you understood about the game?
I just want to add one comment before he gets that, but for those following along at home, we did prep 2135 that we were going over the 2017 game. So I think they all should have read the manual ahead of time. So this is not a superhuman feat of having both read the manual and finished the test in 25 minutes while Mike and I were talking.
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. So what I got from the rules test, usually when we do this at 2135, we do have a pretty basic rules test. Usually we break it up into like sections. So instead of doing one form for all the rules, we have like a different form for every section of the game. But I really liked this format that you guys did, and I thought it was very, it had a very good like understanding of all the rules in one form, and I really liked how you guys formatted everything.
What were some of the things that you got? Did you guys go over sort of the problems that you missed, and what were the questions you missed, and what were sort of some of the things that you guys had missed on the test from your reads? I guess maybe we didn't get to the time to look through that. I can't remember, Mike. I can't quite remember what it shows you at the end.
I think at the end it shows you what questions you did or did not get right. I'm not sure if it just gives you a score, but I have the sheet here. But yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think of.
That would go back to your earlier questions of what are the kind of things that are hard to pick up from the rules that people struggle with.
Yeah, exactly. I think one actually, we were just talking about this. Where we talked about when they were taking the rules test. I think one question that I see a couple of people got wrong was there's a question on where can fuel start at the beginning of the game. And this is one of the tricky things, right? Because there's multiple ways for fuel to be introduced. And a couple of our, our team members from presentation had the loading lane as being one of the areas where fuel can start at the beginning of the match. But it was my understanding that all the fuel was either in hoppers or in robots. Is that correct? Or did I miss something? Where were the loading lanes? You guys remember this from the rules? You guys read the rules probably more recently than I have. Anyone want to help us out? What was the loading lane?
The loading lane is behind the line station.
Oh, okay. Is that the area where they have the baskets where you could put more fuel? Is that right?
Oh, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, so if fuel didn't start in the robot, Christine, would it start in the loading lane? Is that how it worked?
Yes.
Yeah, it could start in the hopper or the loading lane if it's not in the robot.
Okay. See, I completely forgot about that, and it's only been like 4 years or 3 years or whatever since we played that.
But those
you guys are.
Yeah, those are the kind of details though that are important as you start to think through your strategy. Because if you're building a strategy around fuel, you need to know where the opportunities are and where you want to go get it.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. I think that this might have been just there's a question on how long autonomous and how long teleoperated period is. And I think everybody got it right for the most part. I think one person forgot to include that teleop is 2 minutes and 15 seconds, but auto is 15 seconds, and everybody got that. We had a couple different answers for this question. What is this? Select all the correct statements about scoring match points in the teleoperated period. And we have a couple of people, I think, missed the 5 points for breaking the baseline with the robot bumper. Am I correct? Am I getting that right? Were there 5 points for that? Help me out, guys.
Yeah, it was. I think we probably just misread that because that would be during auto instead of teleop.
Oh, and the questions say teleop?
Yeah.
So I think the question was trying to trip you up.
Yeah.
So I think the question was meant to elicit part of that brainstorming process and that discussion, right? Of actually understanding once you get to the teleop period, what are your options? So I think is the correct answer 40 points per rotor turn, 1 match point, and 1 KPA for every 9 fuel in the low efficiency goal, and 1 match point and 1 KPA for every 3 fuel in the high efficiency goal. And those are the 3 ways to score points. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other things are either ways to score points in auto or ways to score points in the end game, right? By either the what do they call the climbing the airship? The touchpad, is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay. This is good. Like, part of this is actually, understanding, like we were talking about, what are the phases of the game. So sounds like, the questions they're meant to be a little bit tricky, I think. So it's good.
Cool. Well, I think we're right on time for moving on to the next section.
Let's do it. All right, Travis, do you want to give us an intro on how we're going to approach this, and if people want to do it at home or at home with their groups, what they should be looking to do?
Yeah, great. So the next part is, once you understand the rules, you want to focus on the what. So really, this is all. Notice we're not talking about. You'll notice we're not talking about what the robot's going to do or what the robot's going to look like. We're actually talking about what can you do during the game. And so what we have here is we have a list of prompts here about different questions that is sort of generally applicable to different, or generally applicable in different games, about sort of what are the main ways that you want to start thinking of frameworks you want to think about what you can be doing in the game to score yourself points. And so really, this is a point where we're meant to, we want to have a conversation as a group about these different items. And I think, last time we did this, Mike, I think we split all the different teams up into, looking at one question for like a 30-minute breakout. I think right here, maybe we could pick a couple of these questions to talk through in more detail, and then go ahead, go do some brainstorming on this together. I think that, our thinking right here is that, well, actually, why don't we go through, we'll intro all the questions and then let people break off if they want to discuss within their breakout session, the different questions, and we'll pick some here to talk through the group.
Yeah.
So you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, so I think, Travis, if people are doing the mock kickoff on their own right now or working along, they should probably break off and start chatting through the public, a copy of the public document with their teams, right? And then we can just start chatting.
Yeah, let's maybe start by we'll just go through all the questions to get because everyone's got to read through them anyways. So the first question that we have is list all the types of game elements in the game. How many of each type of game are in the single match? Are there any protected zones that that only one alliance can use? I think that we talked a little bit about that in the last session too. Second question is really list all the ways that to score points besides foul points and calculate the theoretical maximum score of an alliance. So this is really helpful for framing, what opportunities you want to go after later. Next one is list all, if any, possible ways to de-score points besides foul. How can you take away points from the opposing alliance? And this isn't always an opportunity in every game, but if there's an opportunity for de-scoring points, you want to know about it, and this process gets at that. Next question is describe the ranking process in qualification matches. What factors impact a team's rank? If there are ranking points to sort teams, what are the tiebreakers? In what order do the tiebreakers apply? This is really important when you get towards, if you think about one of the goals for a competition is to seed high so you can control your destiny in the elimination round. Well, to do that, you need to understand how the seeding game works. And that has changed over the past couple of years. So it's important to really make sure you know that. Question 5, what are some ways human players can manipulate the game items? What strategic advantages could come from them? Question 6, what does your team think is the best way to take advantage of autonomous period? Question 7, what can the robot do? List out everything. And notice this is what, this what do list is not around, it's not about how you would do it. It's about what you could do with it. So shooting balls is going to be different than talking about a wheeled shooter. The how, the wheeled shooter part will come later in the how. And it's really important as a team to really, we get all excited about, we all love building things. We love designing things. And it's really, particularly in 971, we have the tendency to jump to the hows too early. So we've really tried to, over the years, be deliberate about keeping that stuff separated out. And then last, sort of what should our robot do? That's what Mike was, this conversation, we won't go through this here, but this is a much more, in-depth conversation. And this is really, I think, getting to that question someone was asking about, how do you trade off the cost benefit on the different things. But here, looking through the questions above, the idea is to sort out, where are the opportunities to score the most points, and to build an alliance and a strategy that is going to be able to win. So, I think maybe, so now we're going to be going to the breakout session. Please feel free to tune us out. We'll come back in 20 minutes at 2:25, and we'll review what it is that we've gone through. So, and in the meantime, so feel free to turn the volume down, go off and work with your team, and we'll get through and working together with this team. Great.
All right. So 21:35. Let's start diving into this. I believe Christine's going to be our note taker. So Christine's going to be a part of this and also trying to document what we chat about for each of these questions. But yeah, let's just imagine we're one of the small groups on our team, and we've been tasked with a couple of questions to answer. What if we just go through question number 1 first, right? It's kind of a straightforward question.
Sounds good.
What about, okay, so let's list all types of game elements in the game. So what are we looking at here? What type of game elements do we have?
We have fuel and we have gears.
All right. Any other, I guess those would be the two. Are there other game elements in this year? I guess they're.
Did-
What do you think, Travis?
Yeah, the rocket ship was kind of a game element. Or
Yeah.
sorry, it was the steamship, right? Yeah, the different year.
The airship? Yeah.
Airship, yeah.
Maybe. Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. I think for game elements, really I guess it could be defined better. But I think fuel and gears is exactly right, Jadalyn. I think I think, fuels and gears are the things that like robots are going to be picking up and manipulating. So how many of each do we have in the game? Anyone figured it out? Let's see. Well, let's math it out. What are the options? Like, where is fuel found on the field, and how many do we have?
Fuel is found in the hoppers, and there are 6 hoppers around the field.
6 hoppers.
Okay.
Are there 6 hoppers?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think they're looking at. I have the manual up on my screen, kind of reading through that. It looks like there's 6 hoppers on one side.
Okay.
And I think there's 2. Well. Oh. Well.
Wait, hold on. There's 4 hoppers, I think, on each side.
Depends on how
okay. So are you guys able to see what I'm sharing on my screen here? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the rules. Yep, you've got the rule manual up on beside us.
Yeah. Okay. So I count 10. Are you guys getting that?
Yeah, there's 6 on one side and 4 on the other, I believe.
Okay. Okay, and then how many fuel is there per hopper? See where we get that information from.
I think it says 100 plus or minus 4 in each hopper.
Oh, okay. And is that in each of these buckets, or is a hopper defined as the whole structure? So like, would it be 100 per basket, or is it 100 like for the set of baskets?
I think
it's in
per basket.
Per basket? Okay. So in that case, you would have 100
Wait,
fuel.
sorry. I think it says oh no, wait, never mind. You're right.
Oh yeah?
Well, it says 50 plus or minus 2 in each hopper container.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that helps. Okay. Where did you see that, and what section are you reading for that?
Let me see. I'm at
Like section 4.
Section 4, 4.2.
In match setup?
Yeah. On C it says 100 plus or minus 4 in each hopper, which is 50 plus or minus 2 in container.
Okay, so it sounds like a hopper is a set of 2 containers. Oh yeah, look at, you guys see this map here?
There we go.
Yeah, this explains it all.
Yeah.
See, this is what the whole learning process is. Now we know where to go for all this information. Oh wow. Okay. All right. So there's 100, 100, 100, 100, and 100. Okay. And then where else is fuel? I mean, I guess this map is giving us the answers right now. Who wants to help fill in the gaps here?
There's also 20 in the loading lanes.
Okay. And there's 1 loading lane per alliance, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I see, you guys see point A on this manual too, on the screen share here.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like 10 are available to each team. And then if they're not preloaded, they go into the loading lane. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, who wants to do some quick calculator math? What does that get us to for final results? Anyone have a number? Everyone's checking their notes.
There should be around 600.
Yeah, I think I'm getting 600 too. Does that check out?
Yeah, I got 600 as well.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. And then real quick, what about gears too? And then we'll hop over to another question. How many gears are we looking at? I mean,
So there's one in each airship.
Okay.
And then they're also in the loading lane. So there's 18.
18 in each, yeah.
And then there's 3 that can be preloaded. So I think that would be about 44 in total.
Yep. Okay. 44 gears total in the game, 600 fuel total in the game.
And are any of those, maybe let's talk about the gears, are any of those gears in a zone that only one alliance can use? That was that's the kind of follow-on part of that question.
Good point.
Well, in the airship, there's 1 gear that's already in the airship, so I guess it can only be used for that alliance.
Yep. Then I think I guess with gears, pretty much everything is allocated to an alliance, right? Like of those 22 gears that you would that which 22 of them are in control of one alliance and 22 in the other. Which is actually kind of different than we usually see in an FRC event. Usually there's some common ones that you can fight over. So
Travis, are you saying that because like the only way for like a blue gear to go on the field is if the blue alliance wants it to be on the field? Correct. Of the ones that they control, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess once it's on the field, it's in a neutral zone. Like if you made a mistake, someone else could get that, but there's a lot of control for the alliance of how the gears come out.
All right. What about I feel like we've addressed this question pretty well. What do you think about going to question number 4, Travis? Talking about the qualification process a little bit.
Oh yeah, we can skip. No, I'm gonna agree with you. Whatever you say, Mike. Let's go.
All right, cool. So question number 4: describe the ranking process and qualification matches. What factors impact a team's rank? If there are ranking points to sort teams, what are the tiebreakers? In what order do the tiebreakers apply? Okay. Anyone want to take a stab at this?
So does this mean like what could earn you a ranking point?
Yeah, or I guess our ranking point's a thing. I guess we haven't even established that yet in our discussion. So what are ranking points and how do you get them?
That's us showing our age there, Mike.
Yeah. Do you guys have feedback on how that works?
Basically, in a match, you can get about a couple of ranking points based on if you win or lose or if you complete a certain task. And based on how many ranking points you are sorted into like a ranking. And then the top 8 teams with the highest ranking points become alliance captains.
And what are the values for those ranking points that you mentioned?
Yeah, if you have a section, we'll pull it up too. I don't know if you're reading.
Oh, yeah.
If you've found a place.
You guys know what section of the rule book this would apply to? Let's see. I think it's 10.4.3. Do you guys agree? Is that the right one? Qualification rankings.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Jadalyn, you want to break down what this means for us? What are the ranking impacts here? What do we got to do to get ranking?
So each winning alliance gets 2 ranking points, and if you tie, you get 1 ranking point. And if you receive at least 40 KPA, you get 1 ranking point. And then if you engage all 4 rotors, you also get a ranking point.
Okay. And what other factors impact rank besides ranking points?
Oh, there's a table at the bottom of that page, and it tells you like the order. So the amount of ranking points is like the first way you're sorted. And I believe if you're tied in ranking points, then it goes to the sum of all your match points, and then it just goes down that list.
Cool. Yeah, I rarely have I seen it go beyond that first sort, the second sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guess sometimes though you got to watch out though, because that some of the match points, that's a pretty, so those are large numbers that have a lot of granularity to them. So it's or a lot of sort of nuance of how you could score points. So it's likely that people will have different numbers, but sometimes the buckets are pretty small, and so it can get pretty close on those.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I think we've done it. We sort of sorted out what all those points are. Maybe we should it's not all of question 8, but to talk a little bit about given this information here, what if we wanted to rank high, what does this mean for what our robot should be doing? Is there any insight that we can sort of gain from this about what's valuable and what are things that we want to make sure our robot should be able to do?
So if you want to accumulate points and KPA faster, then it's kind of important to be able to go into the high efficiency goal.
Yeah. And why is that for those who've fallen along that maybe haven't read the rules?
Well, it takes I think it takes fewer fuels to like get a higher points if you're going to the high efficiency goal, and so you can increase your KPA and get to 40 quicker.
If I remember correctly, it's during autonomous mode, it's 1 point in the high efficiency. 1 ball is 1 KPA in the high efficiency, and then 3 balls is 1 KPA in the low efficiency, and then it's a third of that during the teleop. So it's a lot of balls.
So if we're figuring out a list of criteria, what other things do you think are okay? So shooting high is one thing that seems to be important. What other things would it be important for a robot to be able to do? And I guess in shooting high too, are there any other additional factors with that? Like just being able to shoot balls into the high goal. Do you think that's enough, or do we need to add a little bit more of a clarification on what we need to do with that task?
Yeah, Mike, I'm realizing.
Oh, sorry. Oh, wait.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
I think also having like a consistent consistent shooting, so that that like all your balls are going to go into the high efficiency goal instead of like out into the arena or stuff like that. And also maybe like the rate at which the balls are shooting as well is a factor. So maybe having it have like a faster rate of shooting so you can score more efficiently.
Why do you see the rate's a factor?
I would say it's a factor because I think there's I'm not sure, but I think I saw something in the manual where it said that it had to there's a certain amount of time where it registers when you shoot into the boiler. So and then also sorry, go ahead.
So that's the trend. I think in particular relating to the transition between auto mode and teleop mode, there's going to be a delay in processing fuel. So everything that you shoot, if you shoot during the first auto mode, it's not necessarily all going to get counted in auto mode. Sorry, go ahead.
And then I guess just like efficiency, as well. With like your robot, you want to make sure that you can shoot like so you can get as much points as you can, during the match.
Yeah, I think to add on to Christine, also, to get 40 KPA, that would be either 40 balls during auto or like 120 during a match, which is, and like considering we only have 2 minutes during teleop, or 2 minutes and 15 seconds during teleop, you really have to shoot those at a pretty fast rate in order to get enough for that 40 KPA.
That's another good point.
Yeah, you know, having this conversation here, Mike, is making me realize why we have a list of all these questions and why we don't skip out of order. Because, you know, having you know, Mike and I get to cheat, and we know the answer from 2017 of what got you winning matches and seeding high. And I think that, you know, question 2, you know, we're listing all the different ways to score points. Actually, that this 2017 was sort of unique in that the different ways to score points and to be effective at scoring didn't necessarily line up with what was advantageous to do for ranking points. And really, I think that the highlight on that is that, you know, I think we're used to in recent years seeing the end game be, you know, the climbing end game be tied into getting the ranking point. And this year, the climbing end game wasn't. So we don't, you know, it doesn't show up from just looking at the qualifications. You don't see the importance of getting rank of climbing, but the climbing ended up being a lot of points.
So we've talked about one element of the game so far. What other things do you think our robot would need to be able to do? It could be basic or it could be high level. We're shooting fuel, sounds like, and we're trying to shoot it fast and consistently. Jalen, if I could expand a little bit on what you said with the fuel, it sounds like we want to try to shoot enough in auto to get the ranking point, right? Because it's much easier to do it in auto than in teleop in some senses, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what else do we need to be able to do with our robot?
I think that also manipulating the gears is also an important part of the game, since you can get a ranking point for having all 4 of the rotors turning.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that, Alicia? Like, what elements of the gears are going to be important? What does that look like as far as like robot criteria? What does a robot need to be able to do with gears?
Well, can I explain it in like basic terms, I guess? Is
sure.
that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, it needs to be able to like pick it up and put it in like the designated area that gets the rotor to turn.
Mm-hmm. So it needs to be able to score it on those scoring pegs, right? Or what are they called? The springs? I forget the name. Is it called davit? No, that's not. That's the wrong thing. That's for the ropes or something like that.
Yeah.
I forget what the spring's called. Pegs. Okay, we'll call it the pegs. But you said picking up too. What do you mean by picking up, Alicia? What do you think the robot needs to do from that perspective?
Well, it needs to have some kind of, I don't know if it's like an arm per se, but like a mechanism to be able to like hold on to and grab and then release with like pneumatics, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, where is it picking it up from, I guess, maybe? What's your thoughts on that aspect of the challenge?
Give me a second.
No, it's good. Like this is, you've identified clearly that we need to be able to carry it, right? Because the gears don't start right next to your pegs, right? Aren't the gears on the other side of the field? At least the ones that we score with, right?
Yeah.
So the robot needs to carry it across the field, and it needs to score it on the pegs. But I think the last thing is like what's the acquiring of the gear actually look like? Gears are starting over in the loading area. They're going over to your airship. And I think it's pretty clear. Well, it's not entirely clear because aren't there multiple ways that the robot could score it too, right?
Yeah.
What are the different ways that the scoring could look like? Anyone have thoughts on that? Or at least what's one way it could score? Yeah. Yeah, go. Yeah.
Well, if the robots place a gear on the pegs, then the pilot can like lift it up and place it on a rotor.
Yep.
And then if they get enough gears in a gear train, then they can spin the rotor, and then that counts as points.
Right. So you don't get a point for every gear. You only get a point when you spin a gear train, right? And a rotor gets spun. Yeah, that was an interesting aspect of the game that year. Let's focus on the pickup thing again, because that's the last thing I wanted to, on the gears I wanted to really highlight. What are the different ways that you can acquire a gear in the game? Like where can you get gears from?
So I know one of them is there's one gear that's going to be at the bottom of the airship, so you need to be able to pick it up from there, and it's just kind of sitting. Like,
yeah, where does that gear start?
So that one is like, it just kind of sits at the bottom of the airship, I think.
I think it sits up on the platform. Is that right? I think
Can the robot go up there?
I think it sits right here, right? Am I understanding that right? Yeah.
I don't think the robot can access it, but like the person that's up there can put it on a rotor.
Okay.
Okay. So that's one of them. And we know 3 of them start in the robots, right? What about the other, is it like 18, right? Where do those start?
There's a loading station or like the
loading lane.
Yeah. Okay.
I think also another factor is being able to maybe like pick them up off the ground as well. Because I know that I've seen like a few videos where like it's fallen a lot of times. And I think like being able to pick up from the ground is something that we should be able to do.
So we're getting into these are the interesting decisions to make, right? Because we know that the gears will come through these loading stations right here, right? The return loading stations. They have a slot where you can slide the gear through, right? Yeah. But Christine, you mentioned that gears may be on the floor to pick up, right? Why would there be gears on the ground if they all start in the loading station?
I guess just like during match play, like if the human player has like trouble getting the gear from the robot, or if it just like falls from crashing into another robot as well, that could be a factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe they just get dropped during the match, right? And what do you get? Or like maybe your opponent is loading gears up in their own loading station and they don't have the ability to pick up a gear off the ground and they drop one when they're trying to load it. That one might be available for you to pick up, right? So we have this kind of this decision between, like, there's 2 options for how to get gears and they're very different, right? You guys, you can imagine picking a gear from the ground is different than receiving a gear from one of these elevated slots, right? Those look different in practice. We'll probably make this the last question before we kind of get into some more mechanism discussion in the house. Does that sound good, Travis? But
yeah, that sounds. We should wrap.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up. But like, what are the pros and cons of these? You know what I mean? Like, this seems like a pretty big decision. Do people have other thoughts on why one might be advantageous over the other?
Well, looking at the way the field is set up, you score and the retrieval zone and the place that you score are on completely opposite sides in the field. So if you were able to pick gears off the floor, it might be more advantageous because you wouldn't have to go completely across the field, which would like lower your cycle time of getting gears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think one thing to point out here, this is part of, I think we've identified 2 really important, high-end robot tasks that we can do. One of them being picking gears up off of the ground and another being shooting 40 kPa in auto mode. And this is where this is where the team, part of where the strategy and the trade-offs come in is that we now get, as if we had more time, we would probably debate through which is a more valuable thing to be doing. And really there's a lot of, you're better off if you build within your means and build as Karthik will say build a, you want fewer mechanisms at 10 rather than a lot of mechanisms at like a 5 or something. So I mean, it's good to kind of start with a hypothesis that no, we're not going to be able to do both of these things. What is actually more important for us to focus on, and then build out from there. And I can say that Team 971 this year, we actually prioritized. We didn't pick gears up off the ground because we wanted to focus on shooting. We said gears are done, we're going to do balls. Was not the best strategy, but that is what we said, and we made that trade-off. And I think 1678 kind of took the other approach, and definitely had some good success with that.
All right, Travis, do you want to kick us off with the next, or no, am I kicking us off in the next section? I think I am.
Well, but I think we kind of, I guess we did the wrap in that last bit. We were going to said we'd do a little bit of a wrap, but I think for those that are they're kind of, we're out of the, out doing your own kickoff while we did that, just kind of summarizing through what we did. We talked through question 1, and you can sort of see, if you scroll up, you can see that, we kind of identified where all the different points are. We definitely had some discussion digging through the manual to try to figure out where that information was. But really, even though we kind of studied some of this in the test, going through this conversation brought that insight home. And then we sort of skipped to question 4, which is an important one. They're all important, but it was a good one, where we had to dig out of the rule book where the qualification ranking points came from. And kind of from that, we skipped to 8 to talking a little bit about robots and trade-offs. So I guess it's all live, and it's all in the chat if you want to go back to, or in the, archives if you want to go back to it, but that's what we did. Yeah, Mike, I think that was, it's good. And maybe move on and we can talk about the house. Yeah.
So let's do this. I'll kind of introduce this section. What we'll do is we'll kind of, we'll just go from there, and we'll have an opportunity to just talk about robot house in general. And we'll wrap up at the end of figuring out if we were in a season, what we would do after this section. And then we'll wrap up our presentation.
Yeah, and Mike, let's maybe shoot to, I think it's harder to do the house virtually, but let's try to leave maybe 10 minutes at the end to do that wrap up about what would come next, and make sure we have time to take questions from the audience. Does that sound good?
Yeah, perfect. We'll make this section a little shorter. Okay, so in the house section in general, what you would want to do is you'd want to, we would take in this, we were starting to answer question 8, and we were doing this very truncated, so we didn't get a chance to really flesh out this. But ideally, our imaginary team we would have debated and come up with a refined list in question 8 of what should our robot do, our criteria list. And that's not going to be everything you could possibly do in the game, because no one can make a robot that can do every possible thing in every permutation, right? You're going to figure out balancing acts. You're going to do what Travis was talking about. You're going to eliminate scope, and you're going to make a simpler robot that's going to be successful, right? So once you have that list, then we talk about the house, and we develop ideas for mechanisms. Either that could be we develop ideas for mechanisms or full robot architectures that can accomplish each of the criteria that we set for ourselves in question 8 on the what section. And then, one of the reasons why we always come back to our list of criteria is so that we don't get distracted by things that, would be really nice if, let's say our imaginary robot, we decide not to pick up gears off the ground, okay? If we make that decision, it's important that as we go through the house section, people aren't coming up with mechanism ideas for ground pickups for gears, right? Because as a team, as a collective group, we've decided we're not going in that direction. And then this is more of a practical thing, and we're not going to have an opportunity to share sketches as a group right now, but we encourage all of our own team members to sketch out designs during this section. And we actually give every team member a piece of graph paper and a pencil. And a lot of times if there's a ball, we'll give every team member, we'll give them all a washer of a certain size out of our washer bin that's meant to be the scale size for the ball. And it's important to actually sketch your ideas out to scale just so you can understand the feasibility of an idea. And I think this is something we're going to do in this conversation, leaning on your understanding of past year's mechanisms, what's successful. Maybe it's something your own team has built in the past that you're familiar with. Those can be ideas that come into this mechanism discussion. And then our goal at the end would be to have a list of mechanisms that we'd want to prototype. And so I think Christine's going to continue to be our kind of scribe for this section. We're just going to chat through ideas for various aspects of the game, and we'll list them all out. And then the idea would be you refine that list and identify things that you might want to build. So let's assume maybe a couple things about our robot. It's playing this game. Let's assume we're not picking up off the ground. So I don't know if Christine, you want to write this stuff down. But I'll just lay out a couple of basics and then we'll come up with some ideas, okay? So we're going to assume we're not picking up off the ground. We're going to assume that we're trying to shoot the 40 kPa in auto. Let's assume we want to try to climb up a rope up to the touchpad at the top of the airship. And outside of that, let's just kind of leave it at those basics. Normally, we would flesh this list out a lot more. So with that, and this could be any aspect of the robot, like what are some ideas for how we're going to accomplish this? Are there any things that pop out to you right now that we can talk through? It'd be either a certain element of the game or the whole robot as a whole. Anyone have ideas?
One idea could be for like climbing the rope. We could use a very basic like winch system. So like we could have like something spinning and it would somehow like latch onto the rope and then pull itself up.
That's cool. And by winch, do you mean like it would kind of like go one direction but not the other? So it would kind of like
so when
you up there?
slip down.
Okay. What are some ideas on that particular like grabbing the rope situation? Is there anything that sticks out to you that might work?
Sticks out to you?
Any ideas on how we might, because just probably a smooth drum coming up into a rope may not grab, right? Are there any ideas that you have on like what you could do instead that might work?
Well, I've seen like some off-season matches, so I think I'm kind of cheating, but like having like spikes on or like some type of like thing sticking out of your drum and then having some loops in your rope to kind of latch on.
That's good. You had past knowledge, but we'll take it. That's a good answer. That's a very good solution to the challenge.
Yeah, I think I want to highlight there's no shame in taking things that have worked before and doing them again. I think that rarely in first is a game ever truly new. Or a concept ever truly new. And actually in engineering, rarely is something ever truly new. Often what you're doing is you're taking different concepts that you've seen in the past that have worked together well, worked independently well, and combining them together to create a new thing. And I think that people often lose track of the fact that engineering is really about just finding new combinations for old things. And so I really encourage everyone out there, if you want to be good at designing things and coming up with what we might call new ideas, really it's about, the way to do that is to understand old ideas so that you have many more ideas in your repertoire. And I like to say here that it's nonlinear. If you have twice as many things that that work, it's not that you have twice as many connections, you have way more than twice as many connections to make. So this is good process. Let's keep doing that.
Yeah. Other ideas? It could be about anything for this imaginary robot we're building together.
I guess for climbing, like another idea could be using Velcro. So you could put it on both like the robot and the rope to be able to pull yourself up.
Would you still use a winch in that case? Are you imagining the winch has Velcro on it, or are you imagining like you're grabbing the Velcro and you're like pulling your robot up that way? What are you thinking?
I think like grabbing the Velcro and pulling up. I think.
Okay.
That could be.
Is there any like how would you describe how that would work? Like what would be the process? What would it look like when you're approaching the climb? Because I think I'm having a hard time understanding what you're describing.
Yeah. So you could you could have like maybe like rod or something with Velcro on it, and then like try to line up with the rope and like use that to and then like use that to pull yourself up, I guess.
What would do
like
the
you can
pulling in your
adhere
mind?
yourself.
Oh yeah, sorry, go Christine. You
Sorry.
were
So you
describing
could,
it. My bad.
I don't have like much experience with like stuff like this, but like maybe you could like use that rod with the Velcro on it to adhere yourself to the rope, and then I guess like pull yourself up somehow. And
cool. Have you done Christine, we forgot to do little like introduction experiences. You know, have you been on 2135 for a number of years?
This is I guess next season will be my 3rd season.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Very cool. That was great. Other ideas for other elements of the game? We have a little while to talk about other aspects of the robot too.
What about shooting? What are people's thoughts? You know, having, I guess maybe built a robot that shoots last year, based on what you've seen in some of the recent games. You know, what would you think about for designing a shooting part of the robot?
One thing you could have for shooting, you could have a flywheel mechanism. So basically you would have like I guess you'd have a hopper in your robot or some type of way to store the balls. And then you would be able to have a flywheel that kind of takes balls from there and shoots it in the direction of the place where you shoot the balls in.
Okay. And what, so you got a flywheel shooter, you know, kind of aiming. Are you thinking, how do you think we should aim or what are your thoughts on how you'd aim the flywheel towards the what is it? The fuel, I forget the name of that. The hole in the wall. Funnel.
I guess you could use some type of software techniques, maybe like using a vision system and lining up to that. I'm not sure. I didn't read the rules that thoroughly, so I'm not sure if there's any like retroreflective tape on that.
Yeah, there was. That's a good point. Cool.
You know, another fun idea would be, you know, you could also just run right into the wall right in front of the goal, right? And you could shoot that way. I think some teams did that. That's always a fun thing to do. You know, do you absolutely have to use vision? Because has 2135 done vision before?
I think we used it, if I'm remembering correctly, because I wasn't a part of this season, but I think we used it a little bit in the Auton part of this challenge, Steamworks, to line up to put a gear in the peg.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah. You know, vision can be difficult to do, right? And even if it's easy to see the target, sometimes it's hard to make your robot do the right thing with that information. So, you know, sometimes it can be easier just to run into a wall and, you know, hope for the best.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Okay. I guess going along with the shooting, Jadelyn mentioned the idea of storing the balls and then shooting them. Seems like that's going to be pretty important if you're trying to shoot quickly, right? So does anyone have, I mean, did 2135 try to shoot this past season with infinite recharge? Was that something that you guys were doing? Yeah?
Yeah.
And did you try to shoot 5 balls? Was that something that your robot was designed to be able to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So how did you solve for like storing the balls and shooting them? What did your team do for that year?
We had like a conveyor belt, and so we would intake from the front using mechanism wheels, and then it would go up the belt, and then we'd have like a shooter mechanism at the top.
Did the mechanism wheels on the intake center the ball into like a single line conveyor? Okay.
Yeah. So, but I'm not sure in this this year it was different because we could only have a maximum of 5 balls in our robot, but I'm not sure about this challenge.
Yeah, it's good. Is there any ball maximum this year? Or in 2017? I think the short answer is I don't think so. I think you could hold as many as you could fit, right? So it probably is going to be hard to store them all in a straight line, one at a time, like you guys did this year with the 5 balls in your robot, right? So what anyone have ideas on what you could do instead? This seems like it's going to be hard because you probably have to hold. How many balls do you think the robot should hold? Like, you have an estimated capacity that you think seems reasonable? Anyone have thoughts? Like 200 or like 20 or somewhere in the middle? What are people thinking?
Well, they allow 10 balls at the beginning of Autumn, so maybe somewhere a little bit more than that, but around that range. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing to think about too is, how many balls are in those hoppers, right? How many balls does each of those hopper containers have in them?
They have 50 per hopper container.
So it might be worthwhile to think about it in that regard too. And we're trying to score 40 kPa in auto as part of our criteria we carried over. So we probably want to be able to hold at least 40. And we're probably going to miss some, right? And if the hoppers have 50, maybe we could, triangulate with that information and try to come up with an approach that would do that. But, we're shortcutting a little bit, but I think getting at, if we're going to hold like 50 or 60 balls, it becomes a lot more challenging to try to sort through 50 or 60 balls. Are there any robots? Did you guys follow what other teams did this year? Can you think of any designs that you saw from other teams this year that might work well for storing more than 5 balls? Was there anything that looked promising? I don't know how much you guys followed.
Instead of serializing them, like we did, you could have just like fed them into like a ball, like a basket, and then shot it from there.
Okay. How did teams get balls out of that basket into their shooter? Did you see any things that looked promising?
I would assume they used wheels to kind of get it to that main shooting wheel, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges from this year is how did you get balls from that big basket into a shooter, which, some teams did a couple of different approaches, right? You could imagine maybe you don't even need a single shooter. What if your shooter is like wider? Like maybe it's like 2 or 3 balls wide, and maybe you don't have to sort them into a single file to go into the shooter. Maybe you can bring a whole like wall of them through the shooter at the same time or something like that. Or maybe you can launch your whole bucket, right? Maybe you just like eject the bucket out at a certain speed and like push all the balls into the air. I don't know. That probably won't be very effective, but those are like the ideas that you can talk about in these sort of these house sessions, right? And try to, sometimes the crazy ideas are the things that will work. We've had some crazy like ideas people had in the past that ended up on a robot because, some kid just threw it out there. A couple of the people kicked it around and everyone's like, oh, that's actually like really cool, right? And that's why it's important to have these sort of discussions. And, with more time, we would have probably gotten to a lot more of those sorts of cool ideas. That's great.
And a whiteboard.
And a whiteboard. Yeah. It's so hard to do this without a whiteboard right there. I just want to sketch out everything.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess unless anyone has any last thoughts, I think maybe it's time to spend a couple minutes talking about what would come next. I think we got a couple of things down on our list here. Any other last thoughts on mechanisms? Or okay. Great. So I think the question is, let's imagine we've gone through a much longer period of talking about hows. What's going to come after that? So really, it's one thing to talk about an idea on paper. It's another thing to turn that into a robot that works in a competition. And so sort of the next phase of what what you do, what we kind of recommend next is taking some of these ideas and trying them out in a low effort way. That is going to give you some information about how well they work and whether there's something that you'd want to do in your robot. So we call that prototyping. So really, I think that the idea is out of this how brainstorming, you've kind of work with the ideas to come up with a couple of them that you think have promise, and then within those ideas, you discuss as a team, what are some of the key risks in those ideas that we'd want to get some experience with or to try out in the physical form before we actually commit to it on a robot. And so, an example of this, thinking through our list here, talk about having that basket that takes the fuel and funnels it down into a shooter. Well, that sounds like a lot of risk to me based on, and that's based on kind of experience of what we've seen. I guess I'm basing that on experience. And so that would be an area we'd look at and say, okay, we want to try that out with a prototype. We want to maybe get some wheels and get a couple of drill motors, some pieces of plywood that we screw together, some old robot parts that are kind of kludged together into something that gives us a representative feel of like what that might look like. And then turn it on and see if you can get it to where you have a prototype where you have something funneling balls out. And doing that process, through doing that process, you'll learn what causes balls to jam, where they jam, to get an idea of how fast they'd cycle out. And you can then assess whether that idea is something that works and whether it meets your design objectives. And then, do that with a couple of, ideally, you're splitting up into a couple of groups and doing that with a couple of different ideas all in one time. And from there, you can then sort of get a sense of which ideas are working the best, and then those form into a robot. Our team does a lot with, I think both our teams do a lot with CAD. And so, we're designing the robot in the computer before we're making that. And so sort of that step after prototyping is what we call Crayola CAD, where you're taking those ideas and you're sort of putting them together into big blocks inside of a CAD program to make sure that all the things fit together in 3D like you thought they did on paper. So then from that, we kind of detail things out in the mechanism, and then we start building robots. And that's a pretty high level. Mike, do you want to comment on add anything in there, what you guys see? Or
no, that described the process great. I think some teams can be intimidated by how much other teams use CAD, and I would say there's so much that you can do without ever needing to pick up a piece of CAD software to design a good robot. Like some of the things are like building the kitbot's great, but drawing things out on sketches and drawing things with graph paper or sketching ideas out on the whiteboard. You can build prototypes by hand with plywood and 2x4s, and then there's a lot of great things that you can do making robots by hand. And so you don't have to CAD everything, and some teams aren't going to CAD anything and they're still going to build great robots. So it's really a matter of what's right for your team, and then identifying the path forward with these steps. So the Crayola CAD's great, but it's definitely not the be all end all. If you want to just sketch everything out on a whiteboard and kind of approach it from that perspective, that's totally an appropriate way to do things as well. There's really no one size fits all approach to this.
Yeah, I would say back when I was a student on 971, we didn't use CAD, but we did everything on the whiteboard. I think one thing I'd add to that is that it's important to get to where you're drawing things at scale. So, take the time and iterate and refine your sketches a little bit. So you're really measuring things and making sure that there's basically, is there enough room between the bumpers for your mechanism to fit? Or is there enough room, like with how you stack up all of the elements like the battery and the drivetrain and everything to fit everything? It's good if you can sort of get a sense of that at the sketch level before you actually build it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can get a couple. Are there any questions, Vlad? We can address maybe one or two before we wrap up.
There's one, I think. Yeah, there's still one. I'm not sure if the person's still here because it was there quite a while ago. So is endgame considered part of the tele-op? Something like
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it depends on the year. Sometimes there's a defined end game with a different set of rules that apply during that period. Sometimes there's objectives that can be accomplished towards the end of the match, but don't necessarily have to, but you only get points for it at the end of the game. Sometimes there's no end game at all. Like in 2014, there was no thing called an end game. There weren't any extra points available at the end of the game. It really is dependent game to game.
For there's like no more questions unless somebody posts something like soon.
Well, while we're giving people a chance to post questions, do you have any wrapping thoughts, closing thoughts from our participants from presentation? Anything that any observations you had or insights you've had from going through this process with us?
I'll just say I really liked how everything was formatted, and like this, I really liked learning more about your process of like going through first like the rules and then like how much each point is worth, and really like coming up with which tasks should we focus on versus which do we think is not attainable for this season for us. So yeah, I really thought it was really helpful.
Yeah, even the simple things like using washers for scale and having everyone like put their designs on pencil and paper. I think those are just subtle but useful tips. So thank you for, yeah.
Yeah, I think the overall layout was great, like going off of what Jadelyn and Shweta said. I think it was really insightful, and thanks for letting us be part of your process, our example, I guess.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm glad that it's been helpful. No, thank you so much for joining us and being part of this virtual workshop experience. I think it's been a lot of fun from our side. Hopefully, it's kind of weird that we don't get to interact with everyone who may or may not have been following along at home. But really, hope that you guys were able to, that were on the videos, were able to take this and learn something from it and actually get into the exercises yourself, or if you're looking at this afterwards on the recording, hopefully you're able to go through and try out some of these exercises with your team.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you, Mike and Travis, for that excellent presentation. We unfortunately have to finish it up soon, but it was a good presentation.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Vlad. Thanks for hosting.
All right.
All right. Should we sign off now, Vlad? Is that the way we do it?
So I'm not sure. It's my
All right.
first time doing this.
Well, great. Before we go, I want to personally thank 2135 again. Christine, Alicia, Jadelyn, Maya, Shweta, thank you so much for joining on this call. It was great to meet each one of you, and good luck next season. I know it's going to be an interesting year, but whatever you guys do, I'm sure it's going to be great, and you're going to learn a lot through the process. So thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Mike and Travis. It's been very helpful.
Thanks so much, guys.